Hello, everyone. This is Jeff Foley with Paladin Financial, and thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Paladin Financial Talk. This week, I'm on the same level as Tony.
We're on the same level. Yeah.
Feels
Usually
good.
I
Feels
have to
good.
look up to you, Jeff, and I still do. I still look up to you
Oh no,
in one way or another.
I prefer to stand when I present. So yeah,
It just looks a little goofy when one of us is sitting, and I would stand too, but it's a little harder to control the board and produce the show while I'm standing.
That works, and I can look directly into your eyes.
Yeah,
Lovely eyes.
That's better.
I digress. But yeah, this week's show, we're going to talk about 4 pillars of retirement planning as we step into fall here, and the kids are back to school week for us. And our son Jax went into the 4th grade, and Lex kindergartner. So exciting week.
Wow. You guys are going to be busy.
Yeah.
School activities and
professional Uber drivers taking our kids here and there, but very excited and fun week, but they'll be crashing by Friday, I'm sure.
Those are great ages though. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. I mean, you'll miss those days when they're teenagers.
Yeah. I try to take a lot of pictures and videos to remind myself in the future.
Oh no, they were sweet once. They were sweet. Remember when they loved mom and dad? Remember that?
Yeah, that time. But yeah, this week we're gonna do kind of a quick tour of our newest workshop. So we do, I think, 5 different workshops at Paladin Financial to provide education for people in the community on different retirement planning topics. And this one is kind of a highlights tour of a presentation. We call it 4 Pillars of Retirement Security. And in that, we're covering 4 key areas that are important for anyone, regardless of their age, and preparing for navigating all the adulting that we have, the fun stuff we have to deal with. But you have your financial plan, which involves a number of different things that we'll talk about. You have your tax plan. Good. You have your estate plan, or if you don't have one, you have the state's estate plan. And then finally, health, making sure that we're thinking about some different decisions related to health. So in that workshop, and we're actually doing one tonight, one next Tuesday at Manitou Grill in White Bear Lake. And might be a little bit late for people to attend that one, but if you are available, give us a call. We get you registered for that workshop, but we hold these throughout the year. But we're going to do more of a deeper dive in each of those 4 areas, but wanted to kind of give you a highlight of some of the things to think about in respect to this. And the visual we use is a pie, and you put that pie on the table, split it into 4. You have your financial, tax, estate, and health plan. And in that financial plan category, we won't go through all the content here, but one of the key things to look at is the color of your money. In terms of, we simplify it, and you have red money, which is your at-risk assets like stocks and mutual funds, bonds, things like that. And you have your green money, which is your safer things like banks, bank accounts, CDs, fixed annuities, treasuries, things like that. So knowing what you have in each of those 2 categories as a whole, how much of your assets is in each of those, and if you're saving for retirement or if you're pulling money out in retirement, which of those should you use when, and what kind of mixture should you have to make sure that you're comfortable with your risk allocation throughout the years?
Now, you mentioned health is a part of this, and before we get any further, I did attend the Great Minnesota Get Together, the State Fair. Speaking of health and healthy eating, the State Fair. I mean, I had the deep fried Twinkie, by the way. As you eat the deep fried Twinkie, you can actually feel your arteries harden. Did you know that?
I did not.
Did you know that? And then go for the cheese curds and the pork chop on a stick. Yeah. And for our listeners out there, what we're going to do is on the screen, so our listeners can see it. There's actually a slide. It's that's not quite working.
That doesn't quite look right. Right?
This one works. Some of them look great. But yeah, we can go through some of the slides here so people can actually see it. How's that?
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right.
Good. Yeah, we'll come back to health later. So hold the Twinkies for now.
Okay.
But yeah, that risk allocation is really important. How much risk are you taking? Are you comfortable with that? Is that the right amount for you? And the second main thing we look at in the financial piece of that pie is your income planning. And core to that is Social Security and maximizing your Social Security benefit. And if you have a pension, same with that, is getting the most out of your pension benefit. So we do a lot of Social Security planning for people to make sure they're optimizing it. They know the trade-offs of when to take it, when not to take it. There's some tax implications in there. So much that goes into that. We use software to drill down and look at Social Security planning. But a common mistake that we often talk about is people, when they make their Social Security filing decision, they either don't put any thought into it, or they look too much at Social Security by itself, and they miss the forest for the trees and looking at all their other moving parts. So that's a key to that. That's Social Security.
Yeah, obviously Social Security, you've said many times on past shows, Jeff, that it's the foundation of retirement income planning.
Yeah.
Because it's something that almost everyone will have, at least somewhat, and it's a known quantity that you can use to start a base, right?
Yep. Start with your most solid foundation there. Beyond Social Security, again, excluding pensions, you want to look at how you best use your assets, your red and green things, to create retirement income and fill in the income gap on the couple slides forward that is needed to cover what you need in retirement. So Social Security is important, but if you have your red and green assets, how are you going to fill in those blue bars that you see on the screen to make sure you have enough throughout the years?
Sure.
And we want to kind of put the brakes on and the gas on, depending on what the market is doing and what's happening in the world around us in terms of how we use those red and green assets. Beyond that, as we look at optimizing how we use our assets, one of the key things to reduce or avoid is what's called the sequence of returns risk, which we've talked about before. And that's simply taking money out of things at the wrong time. Simplest example of that is the market goes down quite a bit, your red assets are declining in value. You don't want to lock in big losses and take money out if you can avoid it. You want to pivot to green assets in those situations, which means having green assets in place ahead of time before the market does correct. So that's something we can help people to navigate what's right in their situation. But that sequence of returns risk, if we model and compare two different investments in the decumulation period, you're taking money out, that the sequence of returns has a big impact on the outcome with your retirement plan. So those are a couple key things in that first piece of the pie, the financial plan. The next area we look at is tax planning. And if you look at the federal deficit, the federal budget, I should say, it results in a deficit pretty much every year. We all know the story on that. There's a visual on the screen there that kind of breaks down. In short, we have less money coming in than we have going out. And the money going out, roughly half of that is what's called mandatory spending, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, that most politicians aren't jumping up and down to reduce those if they still want to be in office. So that becomes a problem. So point of that is it's very likely, if you look at this as a simple math problem, that taxes either have to increase or you have to have more people contributing and paying taxes.
Or you have to cut spending. Or the government would have to cut spending, which is hilarious.
Yes,
I mean, that's probably the funniest thing we'll say all show.
I think so.
Is government cutting spending. But you're right. And for those listening on the podcasts, we're talking about the federal budget and the budget deficit. And for those viewing it on YouTube, there is a chart up that shows exactly what you're talking about.
So control what we can control. If we believe taxes are going to go up in the future, what do we do about that? That steps into looking at your buckets of money and how those are taxed. Are you paying taxes as you go, like with a CD or a savings account or a brokerage account? Are you deferring the taxes? So IRAs, 401ks, where you get a tax deduction, putting money into that bucket, it grows tax deferred. But if you're taking money out later in a higher tax environment, that might not feel so good. And the third bucket is things that you've already paid the taxes on and you get to take out the growth of that income tax-free. Simplest example is Roth money. So we want to look at how do you use your bucket strategically on that next slide, and how you have things structured today from a tax perspective, and how you're allocating money between those buckets, not only now, but also in retirement. So
tax now, tax later, and tax never.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So the way we approach this with our clients is thinking of time frame. You have short, medium, and long-term time frame. And then the tax side of it, we went through the 3 tax buckets. So you really have a grid that we want to look at. How do you best use those assets? How should you invest those from a risk perspective? And if you're taking income, which of those buckets should you pull that out of?
Sure.
The next thing we look at is relating to the buckets. If you have money in a tax deferred account like a 401k or an IRA, does it make sense to convert that money into a Roth IRA where you get the taxes out of the way now in order to have that tax-free income later? So that's something we can help you to think through. And should you do it, how much and when, and a lot of stuff that goes into the planning on that.
Because Roth conversions can be very beneficial for many people, right? Not necessarily everyone, but it depends on your situation and what you have. But a 401k or an IRA to a Roth 401k or a Roth IRA can really help your tax situation in the future, right?
Correct. Yep. A great example of that in the next couple of slides is if you're in retirement and you've got to write a big check for whatever the example we use here is a roof. You've got to write a check for $15,000. And currently, before you write that check, you're not paying any taxes on your Social Security income. You have Social Security and pension, and you're under what's called the provisional income limits, and you enjoy not having any of your Social Security income taxed. You now create a taxable event by pulling $20,000 out of an IRA to pay $15,000 after taxes to a roofing company. You now triggered, in this example, 54% of your Social Security income to be taxable. So you went from 0 to 54%.
Wow.
Not so good. Had you instead taken that money out of a tax-free bucket, then that's not going to impact any of your Social Security income being taxable. So,
which is scenario 2 here.
Correct.
Okay. Got it.
So those are a few quick examples in the tax planning side of things that we want to look at. Moving into the estate plan, most people don't have much of an estate plan or anything, and they're relying upon the state. So we won't go through all these questions, but we want to look at how well do you have things set up? How well are you playing that estate game, if you will? And what are things going to look like if you are no longer here? Is your family still going to be getting together for Thanksgiving, or did that bond get torn apart a bit because there was confusion and a lot of unfun emotions that happen because of not having a good plan? So with estate planning, I think of 3 things. You have to have the right documents in place, pair those with the right strategies, but also make sure those are communicated to the right people.
In other words, and what I've learned, Jeff, the right people is key. In other words, I wish my grandfather with his estate had been working with a financial professional like yourself and had been working with a trusted estate planning attorney that knew what they were doing and that worked closely with a financial advisor. I know you work with Matt Tram and have worked with other estate planning attorneys who your clients use. And I think you have to have those professionals in your corner if you want to avoid causing family disharmony. The 2 of my dad's siblings aren't speaking to each other because there wasn't clear communication. They didn't have a good estate planning attorney, and they weren't working with a financial advisor.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. And it's very common. So that is an area we try to do a lot of heavy lifting with our clients to get that done and make sure you're not relying on the state's plan and money isn't going to people that you don't want.
You want to preserve family harmony, and you don't want to leave your loved ones, a spouse or your kids, in a bad situation.
So fast forwarding a couple, that if you look at, let's say you don't have a will, or if you do have a will and you have assets that are going to fall through the probate process. Probate simply means to prove. And it's a process that is gone through to make sure who gets what is covered. So there are delays that happen with that. There's publicity, costs involved, and the bigger the estate, generally, the more of each of those that comes into place. So there's some common estate planning documents. We're not going to give any advice on this here, but very common ones. You have trusts and wills, and with trust, most commonly, revocable living trusts are the most common one that people use, but there are places for irrevocable trusts. Will is giving the probate court direction on what you want to have happen. And then you have two powers of attorney. You have financial power of attorney and healthcare power of attorney, and deciding ahead of time who can make decisions on your behalf for financial and healthcare decisions, and what are your wishes, your expectations. So those are important documents to look at, having the right ones in place for you, keeping those up to date over time. And a lot of people put off estate planning because of some of the myths that you see there on the screen, but a lot of times the objection is it's too costly. It doesn't need to be. And if you look at the cost that you and your family would pay over time not having a plan in place, it's more expensive.
It's much less than going through probate and the cost that it could be. It's better to pay the cost to set up a trust and a good estate plan up front. Yeah. I learned that the hard way with helping my dad deal with his father's estate. It was
not good.
Tough.
Another common one is I'm not old enough yet. I don't need to worry about that. Well, we all know life and death happen. And
you hear the horror stories all the time, like Prince. Didn't have a solid estate plan, and some of that is still in the courts.
It is, and we see that in the hundreds of clients that we work with. Is things happen along the way. So don't assume it's not going to be you. That's irresponsible, and you're putting a burden on your family that doesn't need to be there. So those are things you want to be aware of in the estate planning side, kind of a cliff notes there. The last piece we look at is the health plan. And for people that approach the age of 65, you get inundated with the mailings of Medicare, and you're like, what's going on here? What did I do? What did I do? So there are a lot of moving parts with Medicare. In short, you have original Medicare, which is Part A and Part B. And in the workshop, we go into more detail of what's covered in each of those. Medicare supplements are used to fill in some of the gaps that occur, that Medicare doesn't cover everything. And you have different options with that. You have Part D, as in dog, for prescription drugs. And you can also sign up for dental, vision, and hearing plans, and have various combinations.
That are supplemental plans outside of original Medicare, but in addition to as well. So that's how that works. So Medicare, people don't usually understand, but there's original Medicare, and then there's Medicare supplements. And those you can use in conjunction, or you can, instead of those, use an Advantage plan. Do I have that right?
You got it. Yep. And that's what the visual on the screen there. The left side is the more traditional. The right side is Medicare Advantage, which takes all three of those together, A, B, and D, and covers it under one plan. The left side might be right for you in a given period of time, and then the right side. So you want to have that evaluated over time. And Nikki, my much better half, is a specialist on that in our office and helping our clients and navigating what do you do with each of these and when. So that's something we can help you out with. But you want to understand how A and B works, Part D. Another key thing that comes into play is what's called IRMA, Aunt Irma, as we like to say. So IRMA relates to your Part B. And
I remember Aunt Irma well.
Yes, bless her heart.
Yeah, she accused everyone of stealing silverware when they came over toward the end. That was just toward the end on Irma. But
as opposed to Uncle Sam.
Aunt Irma and Uncle Sam. I don't even think they're my real aunt and uncle, Jeff, to be honest.
Probably not. IRMA relates to Medicare Part B and D premiums. In short, if you quote unquote make too much money, you pay more in premiums as a result of that. And you want to plan ahead for income flows if that might impact you. Roth conversions tie into this, and so much planning that goes into that. We have some clients that are intentionally converting and more on their doing more Roth conversions, and that's pushing them up in those IRMA brackets. They're paying more B and D penalties, in short, but they're going to pay less in taxes over time is the idea. So we want to dial it in and make sure that that makes sense for a particular person's situation. With Medicare, you have different enrollment periods that we go through and help educate people on when those are, and avoiding any type of permanent penalty that might come about as if you're missing one of those. And a common misconception that comes into play with Medicare is it does not cover long-term care expenses. And that can sometimes be a surprise. I think there was a study we have in there. AARP did a study, and roughly half of everyone thinks Medicare is going to help cover nursing home expenses. It does not. So as we look at long-term care planning, you want to think about what you want your care to look like,
Yep.
who's going to provide that care, and make sure things are communicated in advance.
Yeah. And I like the slide where you talk about how we don't like to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. People put off long-term care. We don't like to talk about end of life. And that ties into estate planning too. People
So
don't
much
like to
so.
deal with
Yeah.
it or communicate about their finances or what happens if they pass away, right?
Yeah, you don't like to talk about vegetables, so some of these things you just have to face in life.
Right. I don't think we've ever mentioned vegetables on the show
No, that's a
before,
first.
but
That's a first.
almost every episode, pizza.
New tag, new hashtag.
Yeah,
there.
hashtag vegetables instead of pizza this week.
So long-term care planning is a big one. There's a slide we go through and it talks about the cost of long-term care in Minnesota.
Yeah.
In short, it's a lot of money. If you figure you have $120,000 in a year that you're paying to some facility, that's $120,000 after taxes. If you're pulling that money out of a taxable account, that might be $160,000 that you have to pull out, so you can get hammered on the taxes.
It's nuts. And like you say in that slide, it can be over $13,000 a month. I know that the memory care unit at the really nice facility where my mother-in-law is at, she's not in that yet, but may need it, and it's $12,000 a month.
Yep.
And they don't take Medicare at that facility. So if she didn't have the money, she'd have to find a different facility, number one, which wasn't as nice, and number two, she'd have to have spent all her money down.
Yep.
So Medicare doesn't cover this, does it?
Correct.
Long-term care.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So there's an exercise we go through with our clients to evaluate what options do you have, what cards do you have to play.
Sure.
And the earlier you plan ahead for this, the more cards you're dealt. And that starts now. Even if you're listening to this and you're in your 20s, you want to start planning ahead for what life is going to look like down the road. So those are things we can help people with, but we have a team that can supplement and plug in the right tools based on a person's situation that makes sense for them in planning ahead for those long-term care costs. So we went through a lot there fairly quickly, but your financial plan, your tax plan, your state plan, your health plan, making sure all of these things are looked at. It's not just what was my return last year and what's my stock bond mix, all important things, but we want to have a big picture, a holistic look at all of these things. So encourage you, if you are interested in attending one of our workshops, go to paladinseminars.com, and that always has a listing. You can register right there on the website for any of our upcoming events, or feel free to call us or email us. If you have any questions about any of this, we offer a complimentary consultation where you can come in, sit down, learn a little bit more about each other, see if there's a fit, how can we help you, what's on your mind. And that's a great process people are able to go through. Doesn't cost us anything other than the time that we spend together. So encourage people to do that. If you're interested, give us a call at 651-842-8406. And hope that you enjoyed the 4 pillars of retirement security, kind of breezing through that here today, but some important topics for you to consider.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. Great show today. A lot of information packed into today's show. And that does it for today's episode of Paladin Financial Talk with our host, Jeff Foley.